Hi-Fi Rush is a one-of-a-kind game. It dropped out of literally nowhere in 2023, and yet, despite its fierce competition that year, it was a success. It was a huge win for Microsoft too, releasing not too long after the acquisition of Bethesda, so they were able to put it nicely in their portfolio of exclusives for the PC and Xbox. And by a portfolio of exclusives, I mean literally nothing else. All they had to say about it was praise, claiming how much of a hit it was. So much so that they couldn't keep it to themselves, releasing it on PS5 not too long after. Hi-Fi Rush and Tango Gameworks, the developers of the game, were riding high off the success. They showed Microsoft how much of a talented team they were, releasing an absolute creative banger that was a complete contrast to what they were known for, that being the Evil Within series. I'm not joking here, these two were made by the same developers. It showed off their creative range. There were so many possibilities here. Microsoft had a team of talented developers that could literally make anything. And you want to know what they did with them? They took them round back and shot them in the head, shutting down the studio for good through a fucking last second email.
You're fired. Fired. Oh, should have used the flamethrower. Better well, there's always next time.
Oh, and they also shot Arcane Austin for good measure because of Redfall's failure, which means we will never ever get a sequel for Literal Peak. A moment of silence, please. Speaking of Peak, we will never ever get a sequel to Hi-Fi Rush either, because it's been reported that just before the tragic shutdown of Tango, they were trying to pitch a sequel of the game to Microsoft, but Matt Booty, being spiteful at the fact his last name is Booty, pulled the plug and said a bunch of things that completely contradicted this choice. I don't know if it was actually him who made this decision. Everyone is blaming Phil Spencer, but I just wanted to make a joke about his last name. I know it's a low blow, but they made my video age badly, okay? Anyway, this video is a way for me to reminisce about Hi-Fi Rush, specifically because for a game that was shadow dropped, it completely blew me away. And if I'm gonna be completely honest right now, it was my game of the year last year. What are you looking at? Oh, I see you brought a friend. Hey, whoa! Before you do anything drastic, let me explain to you why Hi-Fi Rush was my game of the year, and why Microsoft have completely squandered an IP with so much potential. Hi-Fi Rush is peak, and it is probably one of the most unique, charming games you could ever play. And I'm not exaggerating. Oh, and it tries to be funny and actually succeeds at doing so too. This piece of art is oozing with charm and passion around every single corner, and that's for a good reason. It was actually a passion project for the director, John Johannes. It had been worked on in the background for quite a while. Even during the production of The Evil Within 2 it was being worked on. It was his dream game, and he made that dream come true. If you don't already know what the game is, well, have you ever heard of
Devil May Cry?
I mean, if you're familiar with my channel, of course you do, considering my most viewed video is a crappy Devil May Cry video. I absolutely hate looking back on it. If you don't already know, Devil May Cry is probably the best action game series out there, especially with the amount of freedom you have with the combat. Okay, now the next game I want to ask if you remember is, what's a rhythm game I can mention here? Guitar Hero? Do you remember Guitar Hero? Well, slap these two genres together and you get a masterpiece of a game. Hi-Fi Rush has you playing as a fella named Chai, a complete and utter dumbass who is written to be annoying as fuck, but he ends up becoming so likable it's insane. Also relatable with the little animation details he performs in cutscenes that you could easily miss that make him feel very alive. At the start of the game he has a broken arm. Luckily for him, he's come to an island run by a corporation called Vandalay, who are giving away free robotic enhancements. Before his surgery can take place for his arm, he has to put everything he owns into a little tub, and that includes his iPod that he's listening to music on. That same iPod is then thrown off a balcony above by the CEO of Vandalay, and the iPod conveniently lands on Chai's chest just before his surgery is about to start. I hope he's alright. Luckily he is. But but his iPod has been surgically placed into his chest, allowing him to literally feel the beat of the music playing on his iPod, making everything around him move to that beat. And there are quite a lot of copyrighted songs, and it's basically implied that the soundtrack for this game is literally just Chai's Spotify playlist. It's kind of funny thinking about it. The developers were actually aware that playing copyrighted music on any form of streaming site or YouTube is a crime worthy of the electric chair. So they went out of their way to make a streamer mode of the entire soundtrack, creating original music that has a similar sound, tempo, and beat to the copyrighted versions of the songs. So they put in a lot of effort here. Hi-Fi Rush has amazing gameplay and combat, and this is where the Devil May Cry comparison comes in, because it's very obvious they were heavily inspired by it. I don't blame them though. Out of every third-person action game ever made, Devil May Cry is probably the best one. Glad it wasn't inspired by a certain Sony action game, or it would have probably played like shit. In Hi-Fi Rush, there are your general attacks. You get light attacks, heavy attacks, and special attacks that have to recharge after use. Which, speaking of the special attacks, I actually prefer how they're done in Hi-Fi Rush. Usually in a lot of action games, they just have a devil trigger like in Devil May Cry where you just regenerate health and it boosts your attack power. But in Hi-Fi Rush, all of the special attacks are completely unique. They can range from a heal, or turning the game into Guitar Hero mid-fight to obliterate everything. This is Chai's Judgment Cut. I am the storm that is approaching. The music's still copyrighted, I can't play it, I'm sorry. What makes the general combat unique within Hi-Fi Rush is the whole rhythm gimmick from the botched surgery. While playing, there is a metronome that shows you the beat of the music playing within the background, and the game rewards you for timing your attacks to the beat, which enhances your attacks and combos. Following this beat doesn't just apply to attack combos though. If you time your dodge to the beat, it allows Chai to perform multiple dodges within a quick succession. You'll know when you're hitting things on beat because of this little symbol that appears alongside audio feedback that is just downright satisfying. What makes the rhythm gameplay gimmick even more genius is the fact you don't even need to use the metronome to time your attacks. Literally everything within the game is timed to the beat. So if you're mid-fight and you can't look at 808, the little cat companion, because without the accessibility metronome, it can be kinda hard to see in combat situations, you can just look around the environment because almost everything is reacting to the beat of the music. Or you could just listen to the music itself. Now this all leads nicely onto the boss fights of the game, and I don't think there is a single bad boss fight in Hi-Fi Rush. They even managed to pull off a giant boss where the lower half of it is obscured and you just slap their hands. The Mad Lads somehow managed to pull this shit off. Usually in most games, these are the worst types of boss fights. Also, shout out to the Sober Scott for his video on giant boss fights, but you forgot to mention this one, you stupid Scottish twat. The majority of the bosses in Hi-Fi Rush are the higher-ups at Vandalay, who want nothing more than to kill Chai because he's seen as a defect due to the botched surgery giving him his rhythm powers. The bosses follow the same rules too, attacking in time of the beat, making it all the more satisfying when you time parries and finishes to combo up with the music. Actually, speaking of the parrying, there is a unique mechanic centered around it with a specific boss and harder enemies. You're put into a one-on-one with the enemy, and they charge up an attack that follows a specific beat, and you need to mimic the charge up they perform by parrying the attacks. Fun little fact, when one of these tough enemies try to pull you into one of these one-on-one parry fests, they let out a shockwave to knock you into it, but you can actually dodge this entirely by just jumping over it. I did this by accident, and right after I completely understood how Alexander Cummings felt when he invented the toilet. Oh, and while I'm on the topic of absolutely insane details, let's talk about the game's cutscenes and art style. I mean, just look at this. It looks outstanding, and I can imagine in 30 years, it will still look good. They take full advantage of the cartoony art style too, having these sleek transitions to 2D randomly during scenes. Usually I don't like playing out entire cutscenes in videos, but the ones in Hi-Fi Rush are just insane, so I'm gonna play my favorite one for you all.
Look, man, I think we have more in common than we do apart. How about...
The The more I talk about how much I love it, the more it hurts knowing that the amazing team behind this banger will let go with no warning. They were just thrown out, losing their jobs, only learning this from an email on the day. It's depressing, and it's a huge sign of how shit this industry is. Games are supposed to be creative pieces of playable art, but now the only way you can get by in the industry is by producing slop that just churns out money. Hi-Fi Rush was a success, yet even then Tango Gameworks was still shut down by Microsoft. Only just a year after the release of Hi-Fi Rush, it was completely fucked over, and it's basically confirmed that we're never ever gonna get a sequel. The same goes for The Evil Within 2. A third game will never happen in that series. It's an IP that's just dead now. So yeah, fuck you, Microsoft.